welcome to Patchwork Pod.
Thanks.
I'm Elizabeth Palmer, and my host today is Sam Guzman.
Yes.
And okay, Tyler.
And Tyler's here
Just
too.
right into
Yeah.
it. Sam, I would love it if you just were to give me a 60-second commercial about yourself.
Wow, 60 seconds.
Or
okay.
less, or more, just maybe not your whole life story yet.
Yeah.
We'll get into that later.
Right.
But yeah.
Well, I am currently the editor of Arts Access, which is a collaboration between the Dallas Morning News and KERA. So I'm an editor now, but I've been a journalist for over 10 years. Got my start in photojournalism and doing video work, and then transitioned to being an editor and being the person sort of helping a team shape the stories. But if I would sum up my life story or what it is about me is I'm a storyteller. I just love telling stories.
That's wonderful. Do you have any particular stories that are like your favorite ones
Yes.
to tell?
Yes. I love stories about identity,
Mm.
how people came to understand parts of themselves. I'm someone who struggled my whole life with my identity
Mhm.
because identity is twofold, right? There's like how you see yourself versus how the world sees you. And I'm especially fascinated when those two versions of someone clash and what
Mm.
happens.
Oh,
Yeah.
do you feel like those things clash in yourself sometimes?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Because I think growing up, I'm racially ambiguous. And I was born in New York. My parents immigrated from the Dominican Republic. And in New York, there's a very thriving, bustling Dominican community. But we moved to Grand Prairie, Texas when I was really young. So that's different. Those are
Yeah.
different places.
Yeah.
And so I was constantly asked growing up, what are you? What are you? What are
Mm.
you? And so in my home, that question was so simple. My parents were so secure in their identity.
Yeah.
And so it was just like, oh, Dominican, it's so simple. But that answer wasn't sufficient for the people in my community because it's a complex answer. Like I didn't realize and understand the Afro Latinidad sort of makeup of my ancestry until I was much
Mhm.
older, right? I just thought like Latino,
Yeah.
but Mexican, which was like the big ethnic nationality in my neighborhood growing up, is very different.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what tortillas was until like I was
Oh,
like
the
10.
food is like so
It's so different.
different.
Yeah, so drastically
Like
different.
music and stuff as well.
Music is drastically different because it's a Caribbean Latin identity that's so ingrained with our African ancestry, right? And
Mhm.
so like our food is more similar to like Jamaica or the Bahamas. You
Yeah.
have pigeon peas and rice,
Mm.
plantains
Yeah.
are like the staple.
Mhm.
And that is not the same,
No.
as like
No.
Mexican
Yeah.
food, right? So yeah, that was always in conflict for me growing up. And I always was searching for sort of affirmation
Mm.
on this feeling of belonging.
Mhm.
And I think that's what drew me to wanting to tell other people's stories because if I could sort of create that sense of belonging and affirmation for others, it always felt sort of rewarding and fulfilling to me because I didn't have that necessarily from a lot of mainstream media
Mhm.
growing up.
Yeah. There's not a ton of Dominican
There's
representation.
not. Fully Cardi B. If only she was around when I was a kid, but no,
Oh.
it took a long time for her to come
Oh
out.
man. I I relate to that. I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people probably have these multiple identities within
Yeah.
themselves, but we're so I think I guess as humans we see others and we're like ready to just paint them one picture.
Yeah, where can I put you?
And so I'm sure other people were saying, "Oh, we're just gonna lump you in with all the
Right.
other Latino communities," but I guess that also makes it harder for yourself to not lump yourself in with other people. Or like,
Yeah.
yeah, like I know for myself, I growing up in a couple of different cultures, I always was like, "Oh, how do I change myself to be like to not stand out so
Yeah.
much?"
Yeah.
Um and like, do you think there was a at what point did you decide that you wanted to, like, not assimilate?
Mm.
Or did you?
So I think I honestly just learned about this new term like a year ago. There's like assimilation, but then there's like acculturation, I think is
Oh.
the term. Please
Oh.
fact check me on that. um and so there's basically like three stages, right? So you have like people like my grandparents, for example, who immigrated to the United States, New York, but they lived in a predominantly ethnic enclave. Like they never learned English. They were like,
Mhm.
nah, they,
Mhm.
held on very tightly to
Mm.
their culture.
Yeah.
Then you have my parents who had to assimilate in some ways, right? Like speak the language. Um, but
Probably
then,
help your grandparents with a lot of, like,
yeah, right.
just navigating.
Yeah, my mom has stories about, like, taking my grandma to all of her
Mm.
doctor's appointments
Mhm.
and having to, like, navigate these complex, documents. Um, and then you have sort of us, like the child of immigrants who don't necessarily want to, like, assimilate. Assimilate, I think, feels like you're just, like, absorbed and you become this American,
Mhm.
but you want to expand the idea of what it means to be American and that it can mean yeah, I like Britney Spears, but also I love, Celia Cruz, right?
Yeah.
Like I can be all of these things. I don't have to choose.
Yeah.
Oh, Tyler. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
I didn't even notice. I was like, "Oh."
You've
Um,
once you have a toddler, you just end up with
I
strange things on your
know.
person, and
Yeah,
suddenly you're like,
exactly. I was
"Where did
like,
this
"Oh,
come from?"
that's fine."
Okay.
Yeah. Um, so I think for me, and I feel like where I've gotten to is your identity can be fluid and you don't ever have to like arrive at a place of like, I
Mm.
accept myself and this is who I am. Cause I feel like that too is dangerous.
Mm.
Because if you don't feel that way about yourself or you do question things about yourself, it can feel, like, really shitty. Oh, can I cuss?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like,
It can feel really shitty,
yeah.
you know? So I think I'm at a place now where I've accepted that I will be on this journey probably forever,
Mm.
and I can continue to grow and evolve and take pieces of me that
Mhm.
I feel are right for me in the moment
Yeah.
and then grow, you know? Like,
Yeah.
I became a mom. I did
Yep.
all like, these different things. It's like you said, your identity, there's so many things that, like, clash and, throughout your life. So this idea that you're just gonna sort of, like, arrive at the station,
Mm.
I think is not ever gonna happen
Yeah.
for me. Yeah.
Can you accept yourself while realizing that you're gonna continue to grow and change in your identity?
Yeah, totally, you know? And then I think especially like racially, right?
Mhm.
And like having the identity of like being Afro Latina, but being primarily light skinned, and knowing that, there might be some people that look at me and don't think, hey, you shouldn't accept that identity.
Mhm.
Or you look at the history, right? There's Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, right? Like we continue to evolve these definitions of ourselves. So I think it's okay to be like, yeah, I'm okay
Mhm.
with how I'm feeling right now. And I feel very accepted with knowing that times change, people change, like
Mhm.
social norms change.
Yeah.
And it's okay to not have all the answers. Which I think if you would have asked me this in my 20s, when you're like, have so much hubris and you're
Mm.
so confident, I would be like, no, this is like who I am. And, da, da,
Yeah.
da, da."
Yeah.
And it's freeing now
Yeah.
to now be in my 30s and be like, oh, you were a little, presumptuous back then.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
And sometimes you're gonna be right and sometimes you're gonna be wrong.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're right, and then things change and that's no longer right. And that's okay.
Yeah.
You know? That fluidity, I
Mm.
think, is very freeing.
Mm. I feel like identity is used as kind of a, it can be weaponized in a couple of
Yeah.
ways, like, weaponized to both, like, well, to discriminate, like, to say, "Oh, you are this, so you can't."
Yeah.
You can't go in there or you can't do this thing or I think I'm better than you, but it can also be used as a weapon of like, um, I don't know, like this is who I am. I'm never gonna change. So don't
Yes.
try to change me.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Aren't people like that
and
the worst?
it's so yeah. And it's like we put other people in boxes and we put ourselves in boxes,
Yeah.
and putting ourselves in a box is the saddest thing because, like, what is life if we're not able to grow and
Right.
be different people? I'm so glad I'm not like,
I
to your
know.
point, so glad that I'm a different person, and I'm
Yeah.
sure, like, if I met my 20-year-old self now, I would love her, and we'd have some weird
Yeah.
conversations,
I'd
and
be like, "You
she'd be
did
like,
what?"
"Who is this
Right.
heathen?" Um, but I'm so glad for her, but I'm also so glad to be where I am now, and,
Yeah.
like, who knows in 10 years
Right.
what it's gonna be like. Like,
Right.
I mean, we're gonna be fabulous.
Yes, of course.
Um,
Yeah. It's so funny. It's, like, so cliche because it's
yeah.
like whenever you talk to anyone who's older and they, like, talk about, like, 40s, 50s, they're like, "Oh, it just gets, like, better in terms of, like, how you just, like, don't give a fuck."
Yes.
And I'm, like, starting to see, I'm like, "Yeah, I kinda agree," you
Yes.
know? Like, you put a lot of pressure on
Mm.
yourself when you're young.
Mhm.
And I think the people around you put a lot of pressure on you
Yeah.
when you're young too. You wanna fit
Um,
in, but you also wanna be cool and different and
yes.
you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, all of that pretty much every day in my
Yeah.
brain growing up, and I think that's what drew me to wanting to tell stories about how people tick.
Yeah. And the middle-aged people who are suck are the ones who are like, "I'm still like I was in high school."
Right, it's
So
true,
oh,
right,
yeah.
living those glory
We need to
days,
oh,
right,
not the glory days.
right.
How do you find your storytelling has evolved as you've evolved?
Yeah. I think, and this is the Virgo in me, I was very judgmental.
Oh, same.
Yeah. Yeah, oh, yeah, we're Virgos. Yeah, we share this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Virgos have a tendency to be
Mm,
judgmental, and I think I've been working on that. But I think when I was younger, I was very judgmental,
mhm,
on myself,
mm.
most of all.
Yes. Yes.
And so I would approach stories about people and what they're
Mhm,
doing and be like,
mhm.
no, like this is right, this is wrong.
Yeah.
Which you absolutely should not do as a journalist.
Mm-mm.
Um, you're supposed to see all perspectives, which I do think I always had that sort of training,
Yeah.
but I think I was much more inclined to be like, "No, I understand what's going on here." And I think as I've gotten older, I'm just a lot more open and understanding of nuance. Which I think we desperately need,
Mm,
in
mhm.
today's storytelling and today's ooh,
Absolutely.
climate, right? Like
Yeah.
the context and the nuance, I think.
Mhm.
And part of that is because it's so quick, to scroll and get through things, and having that depth is a little bit
Mm.
tricky. Um, but part of it, I think, is also just the industry and how things have changed. Um, so Yeah, I think what's great about arts access and what we're trying to do is we're trying to get at that nuance.
Mhm.
Obviously it's arts reporting and music and culture, um, but through a specific lens that's really trying to say, hey, things are more complex than maybe they appear.
Mm. Yeah. I'm sure I'm sure being part of an organization like that in a very I feel like we're a very scrolling oriented we're becoming more and more scroll oriented.
Yeah, yeah.
And like the short form content and like sometimes I'll look for like video editor jobs just
Mm,
so like because I'm like, oh, it would be nice to just
yeah.
have work come to me. Um
Yes.
and all of the job it's all like TikTok, Reels, short form editor,
Yeah.
be able to add a hook and blah blah blah.
Right.
And it feels like people still think that that's what everybody wants, but I also am starting to see and maybe it's just my particular algorithm, but I'm starting to see more people gravitate back towards long form content.
Yeah.
They wanna go more in depth. They want to, like, learn about individual stories. Have you
Hmm.
guys seen that?
I think so. I think I think you always have a combination of a bunch of things happening. I think that, yes, people their attention span their attention span is much shorter
Mhm.
than what it was, and I think social media has sort of, like, gamified our attention, you know?
Mhm.
And so I do think that there's a lot of people that they want that quick boost. I mean, even me, sometimes I'm like, "Ooh, let me just check Instagram for, like, 5 minutes so I can get that little dopamine boost," you know? I'm like,
Yes.
"Oh, I'm gonna see all of the skincare products that I need to buy," you know? Um, instead of going and seeing a dermatologist.
Oh,
Right. So, I think there is that, but I do agree that I think that people are looking for longer sort of conversations, and I do think that us as news organizations, we have to sort of, like, adapt to these different systems and where people are getting their news. I'm of the mind I hate when people are like, "Ugh, no one cares about the news anymore," and, "Oh, people are so media illiterate." Da, da. Like,
yeah.
I think the responsibility is on us
Mm.
to reach people where they
Mhm.
are, and sometimes we can kinda be a little stuck in our ways and just like, "We are so important that people need us," and all of that is true, but just because things are true doesn't mean people are going to listen. I think if we've learned anything
Yeah.
from this era of our time,
Yeah.
is just because things are true doesn't mean people are going to listen. So I think it's on us to figure out new ways to engage people. And I think you're absolutely right. Like sometimes people want long form things. I mean, I look at podcasts and I listen to some long podcast, like a 3 hour podcast, and I'll listen to a little chunk and then I'll come back and
Mm.
um, will I do the same for, like, an in-depth investigative series? Maybe,
If it's
sometimes. If
interesting.
it's
I mean,
interesting enough.
people do, like, listen to true crime
People
podcasts.
love true crime podcasts, right?
It's like, give me
So,
a story.
what I think is most different about our time in media is not necessarily people's attention spans,
Mm.
because I feel like you could go back and, like, people's attention, like, I don't know why I did,
Yeah.
like, old broadcaster voice, right? But
Yeah.
they could be saying this forever.
Yeah, I think when books came out, people were like, "Oh,
Right,
nobody's gonna remember information anymore." And
right.
radio came out, people were like, "Oh, no, but what
Right.
about the books?"
Exactly. But what I do think is different is we do have very, very curated, selected media that's given to us. It is very
Mhm.
rare in today's world where everyone has seen something or
Mm.
everyone has read the local paper.
Mhm.
And that I think is really tricky. And I
Mm.
think where a lot of news organizations sometimes get a little tripped up, us as well, is we want to appeal to the masses
Mhm.
when it's very, very difficult to appeal to the masses
Oh, yeah.
anymore. And
Yeah.
so I think it's better to like pick your audience and understand your audience and reach them. Doesn't
Mm.
mean that you can't have multiple audiences.
Right.
I could argue that Arts Access has lots of different audiences. But when I'm creating one thing, I need to understand what that one thing is going to. If we're writing one story, we need to
Mhm.
understand what
Mhm.
community is this one story
Yeah.
for, as opposed to thinking all of our stories are for everybody. I
Yeah.
think those days have long passed in journalism.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, why would I read something generalized if I can have
Yeah,
something that's, like, made just for me, served up to me? And I do think that can be, um well, like you said, it's tricky, but also I think it can be to my detriment to only seek things out
totally.
in my own algorithm. Like,
Totally.
I feel like I'm in such a bubble.
Yeah.
I make so many assumptions about what is, like, normal, like, what people
Yeah.
generally think, and
Yeah.
then I have to remember, "Oh, no. What I think is probably very similar to a very small
Right.
population of people."
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's y'all's responsibility as journalists to, like, be able to reach people, but also as consumers, it's our responsibility to not let ourselves become sequestered because otherwise we're just we're just yelling into the void or, like, yelling into a bubble of people who think and believe the same thing as us, and we just get more sequestered.
I think you're right. But what do you say to someone who's like, I don't want to be around people who think like me. I don't want to be challenged. I want to just
Oh.
be a, yep, you're right. You're right. Like I don't
So
want
boring.
to.
Well, yeah, I say that, but I don't like being challenged, so I can't say much. Um, but yeah, and I guess as a parent, I worry about it as well. Like
Mm,
I want to teach my kid that, we're in a world where people think differently, and so in order to thrive in this world, you have to learn to have conversations with people who are different and not feel like, um well, you can be triggered by something that somebody else says, but
yeah,
not allow it to completely shut you down and not,
right.
like, give those people that kind of power over you. Um, so not only for myself, I'm now like, how do we raise small
Right.
children,
Especially little boys.
especially little boys?
I know.
Yeah. Um, I'm so worried about social media, like, what it's gonna evolve to by the time
I
they're
know.
they are impressionable, like,
I
I
know.
would have not done well with social media as a
Me either.
preteen,
Me either.
and they're just going out into this big world.
I know. I
Um,
know.
are you gonna give your kid, like, newspapers as he's getting older? Like, how how do you feel about, like, the flow of information towards
It's so true.
kids?
I feel like I've been bad at this actually, because I, like, met another mom the other day, and she was like, "Oh, we love the Dallas Morning News. We pick up the paper and we, like, read the sections together." And I was like, "Damn, like, I don't do that with my kid. Like, I need to
Ooh,
start that." I mean, he
yeah,
is only 2, so
sure.
he can't read.
He's got time.
He's got time. Um, but yeah, and, like, I grew up in a house we didn't listen to NPR, we
Mhm,
didn't read the Dallas Morning News, my parents watched Univision,
mhm.
like, television news, and I know so much now about television news and the things that, get put on there, and, I think it also is tricky because there's a lot of, like, potentially, like, scary news,
Yeah, yeah.
shootings, especially, like, living in Texas and, um, how the government there's so many things, right? I don't know, honestly, how I'm going to approach it. I should be thinking more about it. But um I do think in terms of, like, technology and
Mhm.
the type of information that he's exposed to, I want to delay a cell phone as late as possible. He doesn't have an iPad, and we don't give him the iPad. It's only a matter of days until we crack, I think, but, just because I think that was something that was different in our
Mhm,
childhoods, like,
mhm.
the information you can just, like, doom scroll, even if it's on a news site for a very, very long time, and I want to be mindful about the information he has access to and how much of it he can consume, um, in a certain period.
Yeah. I guess, like, back in the old days,
Right.
it was like there was news at, like, 6 o'clock in the
Yeah.
evening, and you can
Mhm.
watch that, and you
Right.
get the highlights,
Right.
and then it's on to whatever soap operas or something.
Right. Yeah.
And then you get the newspaper, so it was, like, just a very limited format,
Yeah.
and that's, I think, so much healthier for us.
Yeah, I think so too. But I am excited, just, like, thinking about it here with you, like, I'm excited to sit down with him and even watch the news or read
Mm.
the paper because I feel like I can give him perspective that I never got,
Mhm,
that, like, yes, these things are stories and a representation of certain things that are going on in our time, but
mhm.
they're not the only representation and there
Yeah,
are limits,
yeah.
because I think for me growing up, even though I, saw these different media and I've spoken to a lot of people of color, especially in my work with doing like community engagement. And they're just like, oh, these things aren't for me because they don't
Mhm,
see themselves
mhm.
represented there,
Yeah, yeah,
Hopefully those things will get better by the time
yeah,
Cam is, my age.
yeah.
Um, but I think it's so beneficial to him that I know so much about how things work and get
Mhm.
made, which I think is ultimately what people are missing from the news today and why people have distanced themselves and are so enamored with these TikTok influencers because they feel like they know this person, they feel like they understand how this person makes things, right? Like there's
Mhm.
so many get ready with me. This is how we do
Yeah.
it, you know?
Yeah.
And journalism doesn't have that, you
Yeah.
know? It's like you just see the story. And it's not to say that people aren't trying things. But it's not personal. Journalism isn't personal,
Mhm.
and it's not supposed to be in a way because we're trying to see something from all sides
Mm.
and really give you the facts. Um, but at the end of the day, there are people that are behind this and making decisions and trying to do things every day. And I think that's what some people the disconnect is. And
Mm.
if they saw more of that and they understood,
Mhm.
I think they would trust us more.
Mm.
I don't know if they would still, subscribe and pay for things
Yeah.
because it's so hard,
Yeah.
today. But I think that's the thing that they get from subscribing to someone's Substack or
Mhm.
following these people
Mhm.
on TikTok that they don't necessarily get from a traditional news organization.
Yeah. Whoa, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Like, I think about, I think news institutions and institutions in general, there used to be kind of this innate trust, like, oh, if you read something in a newspaper, then you can trust that it happens. But now people, like you said, are more likely to trust an individual.
Mhm.
And, there's this narrative of like fake news and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, and oh, I don't know. There's just
Are you panicking? Are you panicking?
why?
Welcome to my world every night.
Oh no. Um, yeah, like I think it's like even I think about people are like, oh, I did research on this thing, and it's like you Googled it and you
Yeah.
read the top 5
Right.
articles or something.
Right.
But like yeah, there's no sense of like how much work goes into something like that.
Yeah.
And um I don't know where I was going with that thought. Ah!
But I
Oh, but like
sorry,
just
go
the
ahead.
idea of I was thinking with the idea of trust, like how do you start to rebuild that so that people
Yeah.
can like yeah, pay attention to the right sources and or like learn to check sources. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've been doing some things that, Arts Access and then, the Dallas Morning News, they launched a trust
Mm,
initiative and we had an event I guess it's May. Uh last month where we had folks come into the newsroom and they sort of like built their own newspaper so they
so
could
cool.
see a little bit about like how decisions are made. Obviously that's like a very small scale and
Mhm,
how can we continue to do things like that?
mhm.
Um but I think it's a question that every newsroom is grappling
Yeah,
with every day, right? Because digital subscribers,
yeah,
and now you have Google is giving AI overviews and,
yeah,
and it's really scary, right? Because you're like, "Ugh, how can people trust an individual more than they trust this institution?"
mhm,
But then you think back and you look at the history of certain newspapers and the institutions and,
mhm.
how many newspapers after George Floyd,
Yeah,
issued these apologies and like,
yeah,
"Oh my god," or how many newspapers you would like read in the newspaper about lynchings and like see where they were, like
yeah,
so um I get it. I get it and that's where I think I go back to to me and to us like we have the responsibility to reach people um and tell them like hey no you can trust us and you can trust us not because we're never going to do anything wrong but you can trust us because this is how we approach our work
mm,
and this is how we will this is how we will act when we do something wrong and this is the things that we're trying to continue to grow and
mhm,
improve and
mhm.
evolve on
Yeah,
I do think and obviously there's a great tradition of corrections and there's corrections on stories but I do think like people are in this hyper like paranoid and the more that you just sort of don't talk about things,
mhm,
the more it feeds into that. So the more we can just be like, "Yep, this is how we put the story together. These are all the
mhm,
people I talked to. This
mhm,
is who didn't want to talk back to me," and da
mm,
da da da.
mhm.
Because I think there's always a narrative that like, oh, you only talk to these certain people or
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
um, and
You
you
need
don't
that behind the scenes.
that behind the scenes stuff, yeah. And so I
Mhm.
know we're working on that a lot, and trying to do focus groups. At KERA, we just did a focus group just with like Gen Z, which was fascinating because again, it enlightened me. I'm like, oh man, people really have these ideas of like how we do our work,
Mhm.
um, that maybe aren't accurate, you
Yeah.
know? But at the same time, when you do work like that, it's so invigorating because it's like, look at like I think we had 20 something Gen Zers come. I'm like, look, they want to be engaged,
Yeah.
So I hate the narrative that like, oh, people don't want the news and they don't want to engage. Like, I don't think that's true. I
Yeah.
think people want to engage. They want
Yeah.
community. They want news. Um, they want, I think, inherently to trust us.
Mhm.
They just don't know how. And we
Yeah.
gotta show them how.
Yeah. I guess that the word news is like it's like such a big
It's
idea.
so
It's so
big.
broad and
Yeah.
people hear it and they have this
Hmm.
reaction to it, but like everything that we're taking in currently is news, like gossip
Yes.
and every Instagram,
Yes.
like we don't see it as the news, but it's still the news.
Yeah. Totally.
Just because the sources don't
Yes.
say news in the name, it doesn't
Exactly.
mean it's not news.
Yeah.
Um,
That's why it's like information
yeah.
is better,
Mhm.
and I love to say like, how are we meeting your information needs? Like, what do you
I
need
like
from
that.
us?
Yeah.
Because I think when people hear news, they're like, car crash, 13 dead.
Yeah.
And like, I work at a newspaper and I report on the arts and
Yeah.
culture. Like, no, like sometimes there's breaking, but it's rare,
Yeah.
that someone like broke into the DMA.
Yeah.
So for the most part, it's things that I think would be a nice entry point for people.
Mhm.
Um, if they don't want the like car crash, but
Yeah.
they don't put that label on what we're doing.
Yeah. Why do you think it's important for people to have access to arts and news about the arts?
Ooh, such a good question. Um, I think so there's this old school way of looking at news coverage, and there's hard news and there's soft news.
Mm,
And hard news is like plane crash, politics, and soft news is like the arts.
mm,
And I hate that term. I hate that distinction.
mhm,
Because traditionally it's been seen that like if you work in hard news, that's like more prestigious, right? That's more
mhm.
valuable,
Ugh,
right? It's
yeah,
like, oh, this is the thing that people need. And when you work in the arts or where you're working on people's culture and these things, it's different. Um, but we don't live our lives that way. And a lot of times people start to understand things about the politics or the harder things traditionally seen in news through these
mhm,
mediums, through art, through TV shows, through music, right? Um, so I think it's important to cover because one, most people are interacting with these parts of their lives more than they're interacting with what these traditional mediums would say. And two, they all have something to do with each other.
yeah,
They're not different. All of the things in terms of accessibility issues that you would find in transportation, you would also find in the arts, you know?
mhm,
And so the more that we can connect those dots across these different genres of reporting, the better,
yeah,
you know? And then I think for me, especially when you get to the cultural aspect of our reporting, a lot of times, and there has been change, but a lot of times when it came to representation and these things, you would get them most likely in these sections of the paper than you would in like politics.
yeah,
And that's important.
yeah,
And obviously, we should, you know, have it in all sections. But I feel like the arts paved the way for
mm,
these other places to do it.
yeah,
And I also feel like in the future, as we continue to struggle with audience, this is a place that is easier to get people to buy in, you
mhm,
know? Because sometimes people get a little bit fatigued, with the doom and gloom.
Yeah.
And they want to know about just like cool and interesting stuff that's happening. And Dallas is such a great place where so much arts, music, and culture is happening that
Mhm.
is also reflective of those larger issues, but that also just like makes you feel good. And sometimes it's okay to like feel good
Yeah.
and read your news and like feel
Yes.
good about stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, this reporting is so important. And having a robust like society with like rich music and art and culture, is what makes it great,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
No, not just education, but like arts education,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's what makes us humans.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, like I think in terms of arts access and what we've tried to do, I think also traditionally a lot of mainstream organizations have tended to focus on the big institutions and like,
Mhm.
oh, you have an exhibition and
Mhm.
that stuff is great and we want that for people, but
Mhm.
we also want to know like who's just like we just had a story this week about this collective of Latinx women who have come together and they're in Pleasant Grove and they have like jewelry, fashion,
Yeah.
beauty, but it's all with like this modern take on the Latin identity, and they're
Mm.
called the Cadena Collective. It's like, oh, awesome, Like, okay, no, they're not in Neiman's,
Yeah.
but they're still cool and they're doing this cool thing and they're making it work.
Mm.
So like not only is that a story of like rich, vibrant art, but it's also a cultural story and it's also a
Yeah.
business story and it's also all these things. And where else do you find that?
Yeah.
But in the arts.
Yeah. It's the we ooh, I had a I had a thought and then I lost it for a second. We're going that oh, I was gonna so I'm conversely, like if you're making arts accessible to more people and being able to like consume it, then it also allows people to feel more that they can create art in their own life, and it
Yes.
doesn't have to be a big thing.
Yes.
It can be like a small hobby that they do on the weekends
Yes.
or after work
Yeah.
or whatever, um, and then that can then make their life more vibrant as an individual, and just like create I mean, there's so much research done about how art and music and all of these um create endorphins for your
Yes.
brain, and endorphins are what helps to like get the cortisol out of your brain when you're
Yeah.
stressed,
Yeah.
and like in schools, places that have more arts programs, the kids are going to be doing better in other like there's just so
Yeah.
it's like there's so much research. It's such a big like a duh thing. Um and so many people don't seem to realize like
Yeah.
how big of a duh thing it is.
And I think it's partly because, when I first took this job, I will say I was intimidated,
Mm,
because I had not really done a lot of what I would call traditional arts reporting, right? And yet I feel like my life was so enriched by the arts. I mean, the music, the
mhm,
dancing,
mhm,
just like in my living room, like growing
mhm.
up, right?
Yeah.
But would I call myself someone who like consumed the arts? I don't know if I would have said that
Mm,
because I wasn't taken to like the symphony with my parents when I was young,
yeah.
and so I think that's also a hurdle for some people. And what I'm very excited about arts access is when we get at that accessibility is that no, everyone has sort of this creative outlet most likely in their lives. They just haven't been given the affirmation or freedom
Yeah.
to call it that
Yeah.
because it's not in a museum
Mm,
or it's not in a concert hall. So yeah, I'm really proud of how we've expanded the definition of what you would call art as
mhm,
well, because I think you're absolutely right. Probably every single person has touched art in some way,
mhm.
Um, and either they're made to feel bad about it because they like love reality television,
Yeah.
you know, or they are, celebrated because they consume what is considered high art, and
Mhm.
there's so many people, like, in between that, and it's like a big tent. Let's
Yeah.
welcome them all, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. It's like the way that culture and heritage is passed on from one generation to the next, but also how we make sense of the world around us. Like, there's just
Yes,
so many
totally.
aspects to it, and it's a huge form of resistance.
Yes.
And I'm sure part of why there is a lot of like people in power trying to control the arts is to control that narrative and to
Mm,
control that form of resistance because it's like such an easy visible thing to see sometimes. Well, sometimes it can be, I guess, more subversive, but
yeah,
um
that's a really good point.
art is resistant.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just remember having in college, like one of my classes, they talked about um in World War II abstract art. I think it was abstract art. Like what something there are a couple of genres of like painting that were banned
Mhm.
and they would have these underground shows to have like abstract art and it was like a form of resistance because there's so much you can work into that.
Right.
Um Whereas, like, I think I saw a picture that, that Hitler painted, and it was, like, very true to life, realistic, and I was like, "Oh, I
Mm.
had no idea he did that." But he was like, "This is the only kind of art we can do." Anyway,
It's such a good
that's
point. It's such a good point. Like you said, I mean, art is a reflection of like what we value in
Mhm,
society. It's a reflection of like where society is.
mhm,
Um, yeah, there's so many layers to it that I don't think people realize. And when you look at historically, or if you look at what we're going through currently with book
mhm,
bans and things like that, yeah, I think it's powerful,
mm,
and that's why certain people were interested in it.
yeah. If you can control the definition of art, then you can control people's expression, and
Wow.
that takes yeah. Oh, and that takes us to a scary place.
Yeah,
But,
it's true.
like,
Yeah.
even thinking about, like, the Kennedy Center, their
Yeah.
leadership just got taken over, and a whole lot of people have, like, canceled their performances and stuff because they don't wanna support how it is currently being run. Um, and I yeah, even just making that kind of stand, I think, is a way to say, "Okay, we're not gonna allow ourselves to be censored or, we're not gonna be party to this kind of control of artistic expression." Um, so that's something that's given me a lot of hope is seeing how people are
Yeah.
continuing to use art as a way to express themselves and to resist and also find joy because you have to find joy
You
in
have to.
times of
Yeah.
hardship.
Yeah. But I think you bring me back to like full circle, like the arts is a politics story, right? Like with the
Mhm,
Kennedy Center and all of
mhm.
these things. Like some people might be like, oh, no, this has nothing to do. But
Yeah,
I mean, if we're living in this moment, hasn't taught us anything, is that, yeah, actually, all of these things do have to do with the arts
yeah.
as we're learning. So
Definitely.
you can't separate
No,
them.
no.
So, yeah.
Oh, oh, I've been taking notes as we talk, and
Mm,
let me see. Okay, we kind of talked about these things, I think. Oh, well, and one of the things that you talked about with the hard news and soft news, like the way you mentioned it like hard news seems like stuff that's like urgent happening immediately, and the soft news seems like stuff that has more of like a long term impact. Like if you're going to art shows or supporting artists and you're like actively contributing to this culture, then over time that's what's going to help make things better. But we tend to like only hear the hard news because it's like this is a
urgent.
tragedy happening right now.
Yeah.
And it feels like it has such a big impact on our lives. Even if it's like even if it doesn't have an immediate impact on our own personal lives, it still feels like, "Oh, this is a really big thing." And we don't realize that, like, the soft things, like building culture and everything is what helps with maybe um, fighting against those urgent things that feel so scary in the immediate moment.
Yeah. I mean, I think I mean, don't get me wrong, because there's, politics, education, business, these traditionally seen as hard news. They are working on some of these longer, bigger end-up stories and, healthcare, I think is like a great we've been doing some great series, looking at things like that or criminal justice.
Mm,
And those stories are so important. But I do think you're right. I think like news value and what we, on the scale of what we determine, urgency is like high up there.
mhm,
Right? And it's true. It's like if a building's on fire, people need to know that that building is on fire right now, and so that is important. Um but my argument is that arts and all these things are just as
mm,
important.
mhm.
Sports, which is a big thing here,
Yeah,
is just as important,
yeah.
because like the culture around sports and fandom and, that is sometimes going to reach people way more than,
Yeah.
reading about what the legislator is doing this session.
Mhm.
And I do think that breaking news happens in those things as well. I mean, the Luca trade is a great example, right? Everyone went on a frenzy,
Oh my gosh,
right?
people were so
People
mad.
were so mad. My husband is still very upset. He's
That's
not
funny.
gotten over it.
That's
Uh, so yeah, um, but I think, you see resources in certain newsrooms maybe go to certain teams versus others. I would say, the Dallas Morning News and KERA is pretty equal, and that's what makes them kind of great and unique
mm,
in that way. Um, but yeah, everyone deserves a seat at the table, I think
mm,
is what I'm getting at.
yeah,
Yeah.
and everyone deserves access to
Yeah.
art and
Yes. Yeah.
deserves to be able to make their own.
And be celebrated in ways that certain people are and certain people aren't, you
Yeah.
know?
Um, Another thing that, like earlier, we were talking about talking to kids about the news, and it made
Mm.
me think of Mr. Rogers
Ah,
and
yeah.
how he in his programming incorporated like big news stories.
Yeah.
Um, and it made me wonder if we need to start a kids show about the news. Somebody should.
Yeah, I'm like, does PBS currently have a kids show about the news? Am I gonna be like a
Let's
bad
pitch it. I'm ready.
Um, I do love Mr. Rogers as an example because I do think that we've also gotten in a place like obviously I'm not talking to my 2-year-old about it because he doesn't even know how to potty most of the time. But, there's gonna come a time that like I will talk to him about what's going on in the news. And I
Yeah.
will say that PBS like does I don't think they have a kids show, but they do
Mm,
have a lot of like great resources like how do you talk to your kids about a school shooting? How do you talk
yeah.
about these things? But I think we do need to have more conversations with them about like what's going on in the world and not try to
Yeah.
like shy away from it,
Yeah.
you know? And maybe that's me like talking a big game because I don't
Mhm.
have, an older
Yeah.
child, but I want to be able to be like, hey, this is what we're working on right now. And
Mhm.
the newsroom had to, go cover a school shooting,
Yeah.
in a way that's not
Right. That's
scary
age
and like
appropriate.
right and age appropriate, but like it's realities of the world,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And kids can sense when we are stressed out about stuff. So even if we can find ways to say like, yeah, there's some really crazy stuff happening
Yeah.
in the world right now.
Right. Yeah.
And I love that people are writing more books about like certain types of current events or like just things for kids to
Yeah.
help them see this is the kind of thing that's happening out there. Um, and those are our libraries, which also so important.
Yeah, we love a
I feel like
library.
the arts and libraries just go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's like kids are smart and they
They
deserve to
are.
be
Yeah, treated that way.
they deserve to be
Yeah.
part of our world.
Yeah, totally.
But it takes so much attention to not just like trauma dump on them.
I know.
Oh.
But I do feel like my parents trauma dumped on me and I turned out fine.
Oof. Um, yeah, well, you're resilient.
Yeah.
You are.
Not that I
I
want to repeat that. Like, for the record, I'm not trying to repeat that, but I'm just
yeah.
saying.
Um, ooh, okay. I wanna ask what it's like to oh, yeah, what time is
Yeah,
it?
what time?
Mhm. We're good.
Okay.
Um, what is it like to edit other people? Like, how has it been being a storyteller, like, working on your own stories,
Mm,
and now, um, supervising other people who are Gen Z, right?
yes, I have 2
Um,
Gen Z. I guess one is, like, in the middle,
sure. A
some
cusp
on the
cusp
cusp,
person.
yeah, mhm.
Yeah, what's it been like to, to supervise those people and to like I mean, I'm as a Virgo, I sometimes have control issues and those judgment issues.
Mm.
Oh my god, I want to talk about that
The
too.
judgment and the control
I'm gonna have
issues,
to
yeah.
have you come back and talk about that more, or I'll just
Um,
make a note, and if we have time, we can get back to it. But yeah, like
yeah,
I would have such a. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'd be fine doing it, but just like wanting to control what they
yeah.
write.
Ooh, yeah. So, lucky for my current reporters, this is not my first job editing people. I did a lot of growing
Mm,
in my first 2 years, as an editor. But what I will say is I feel like I'm a much better editor than I ever was, like,
mm,
a reporter.
mm.
Because I think my brain, and this is where the Virgo in you, the control, I think my brain is very good at putting the puzzle pieces together,
Mhm.
which is basically what an editor is. You're putting the puzzle pieces together to
Yeah.
tell the best story. And number 2, I think my motivations for becoming an editor were very important. And so, I worked in a newsroom and I never had possible I still have never had a person of color be my direct boss. Um, yeah, I think that's still true.
Mm,
Um, not to say that they weren't great because of that, but there were times in a newsroom where I would like pitch something or I would say talk about something and like it would get shut down or people wouldn't get it. And I'd be like, oh, because there's a certain that's why it's great to have a very diverse newsroom,
mhm.
because there's certain things that I have experienced being the person that I am that maybe other people haven't experienced. And so after dealing with that, I was like, the only way to improve the system is to like move up in the system and open
Mhm.
the door and
Mhm.
create a space for other people.
Mhm.
And so I view my job as an editor to basically create the parameters for my reporters to do the best work possible. And the thing I love about my reporters is like how much they challenge me
No.
and how much they push me
Yeah.
and how much they question what I'm saying. Because I think that not only helps me grow, but it makes it so we produce the best work possible.
Mhm.
So I think I also have a deep need to be liked, and
Mhm.
maybe that counteracts the judgment and the control.
Mhm.
Because if you ask me, like I'm being very honest with you, I want to be liked, number one.
Yes.
Then I want to be in control.
Mhm.
Then I want to
Mhm.
um, be, I forgot whatever the third
You
one
wanna
is.
be in control of how people perceive you.
Yes, yeah, that probably motivates me very much, yeah,
Yeah.
and I hate when I can't control that.
Mm.
Ooh, let's bring it back to the childhood,
Are
yeah.
you familiar with the Enneagram? We
No.
okay. That's
We're
a
gonna do
whole
this?
other
What you
that's a
got?
personality
Oh,
type.
is it the ENT thing? G
No, that's
that's a
Myers-Briggs.
oh.
Oh, I
That's
know all of them,
you wow,
and
okay, I came
it's
to the
like a
personality guru.
nerdy I mean, not the g but the last podcast episode that came out this morning, actually, was with
Ooh.
she's a, like, life coach, and she does professional development, and she,
Mm,
like, knows anyway, that's a different conversation, but, I was asking just 'cause, like, my type is a Enneagram 3, and that's just somebody who wants to perform and will kind of change themselves in some ways to, like,
mm.
be more be perceived as in a certain way. It's like a way to control
Mm.
how other people see you,
Yeah, I
and
can
I
see
think
that.
it's because I grew up between cultures.
Mhm.
I learned how to switch back and forth very easily. Like, I
Yeah,
think
the
if you're
code
only
switching.
exposed to
Mhm.
one type of culture, you just don't know how to do that.
Mhm.
And I think it's like a blessing and a curse because on one hand, you're like, "Who am I?" But on the other hand, you're able to
Yeah.
see all those different perspectives. I think it's what makes us good at our jobs.
Yeah.
You're able to put yourself in other people's shoes. You're able to talk to different people from different backgrounds
Yes.
and not be intimidating or intimidated.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes intimidated, but you're
You hide
able
it
to.
well.
Thanks. Um, I think it's like yeah, it's a blessing and a curse. You
Yeah.
have to be able to you have to learn to wield it with responsibility.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I think when I first started off as an editor, um, I wanted people to like me so much, and I would maybe prolong
Mm.
situations, or I get into the habit of I'll like just do it because I don't want them to do it because I'm like, no, no, I can do it, and then I'll save you the trouble.
You're
Um,
speaking my language.
yeah. um, but you learn that like actually that does a disservice to like both of
Mhm,
you because
mhm.
they can't learn, but also you are spending time doing something that you obviously have need to spend that time doing something else.
Mhm.
Um, but I will say that I just love editing and working with the reporters so much. There's such um a joy of
Mm,
getting to like be with someone
mm,
and witnessing them grow
mm.
and also just like being there to see them produce like their best work possible. It
Yeah.
just feels so rewarding.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean that you don't have like difficult conversations, you don't disagree and you're like, "Oh, sorry." Um, but yeah, it's the funnest part of my job.
Yeah.
That and spreadsheets, which I love a spreadsheet.
Oh,
I
oh.
love
Yeah.
organizing a timeline and the
Mm.
what I think makes me a good editor too is the
Mhm.
organization.
Mhm.
But I just love even just talking to them about like stuff when we're not working on
Yeah.
stories, you know?
Yeah.
Um yeah, I think it's so awesome. It feels and I hope if you like interviewed my reporters, that they would describe as a team, you know,
Mhm.
and very collaborative.
Yeah.
And I haven't always had that
Yeah.
working in a newsroom. I've sometimes felt very siloed. And so in editing, you always have to do that because you're always like working with someone. You know, there's no way that you're gonna like be out there by
Yeah.
yourself,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
reporting. And so I guess I'm just in constant need of attention and people liking me.
Yes.
That's why you become an editor.
Yeah, we are so similar.
Yeah.
I think I forget I think I forget that 'cause a lot of times when we're hanging out, we're, like, talking about mostly kids,
Yeah.
but it's fun to have these other types of conversations and that see everything else that,
Yeah.
is going on there. I wrote judgment.
Yes,
I
yes,
was
yes.
having a conversation with a friend last night about judgment because we went to see a show, and I find myself, like, when I see other people, I think I judge people, and
Mhm.
it's either because I am jealous of them,
Mm.
where well, yeah, I think a lot of times it's just because I'm jealous of them, like,
Mhm.
they're doing something that I'm like, "Oh, that could have been me."
Yeah.
Um, or they're doing something that I like to do, but they're, like, more successful at it or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and so, like, yeah, it's interesting to see when I find myself feeling judgmental, I'm like, "Okay, so what about the situation am I feeling
Yeah.
jealous of right
Yeah.
now?"
Which is really good for you. Look at you, you've done the work.
I'm trying. It's really hard.
That's why I like social media. Like I had to take and I don't post as much
Mhm,
as I used to. I
mhm,
really had to take a break because
mhm.
it would make me feel very anxious and very jealous. And I'm also
Yeah.
like my close friends know this, which I have like 3. um
Well, now everyone's gonna know it.
yeah, I only have 3. Um, but, I am very, like, jealous in my friendships, you know? So if they, like, did
Mhm.
something and I, like, wasn't invited, but,
Yeah.
like, came around and, like, didn't I'm like
Mhm.
or, like, am I as good a friend to that? Like,
Right.
am I on the
Yes.
hierarchy
Yes.
the same tier that the you know? And it took me and I need to be like, it's okay. Like, it's okay if I, like, confide in them more than they confide in me or d
Yeah.
like, it's not like a competition. Maybe it's we're very competitive. And
Also
so
is.
yeah. Um, so social media,
Mhm.
that, like, exacerbated that, and then I also, like, had anxiety when I would post things and, like,
Mhm.
"Ugh, does someone care? Am I making someone"
We're jealous people, and
Yeah, I know, it's
but
hard,
yeah,
yeah.
fueled by, like, that internal competition of,
Yeah.
like, I wanna be if I'm not the best, then what am I?
Right. Oh, it's this perfection. I mean, obviously, I feel like we've both been in good therapy.
Yeah,
It's this perfectionist mindset,
yeah.
that then just like it it seeps into all aspects of your life.
It does.
And you know what? The thing
It's
that like
exhausting.
it's exhausting. I hate it, but I love it because it also makes me really good
It's
at things.
very satisfactory
Yeah.
when you do something really, really well.
Yeah, but then you're all like, also need, like, that validation, and it's
Mhm.
like, "Oh, I did well, and they told me I did well, but they didn't tell me I did, like, really well, and what
Right.
did they like, oh, why"
Yeah.
like, so
And
it
this
does
other person did it better, and even
y
though I did the best that I could,
right,
their best is better than my
right,
best.
yeah,
And
yeah, and you know what has been,
that
like,
hurts.
motherhood? Woo!
Mm.
Humbled me,
Mm.
and like, that is hard,
Mhm.
because you can't be perfect, it's just,
Mhm.
like, impossible, but
Mhm.
damn it if I'm not trying.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the ways that I find myself, like, judging is, like
Mm,
well, so, for example, I'm friends with another videographer who's, like, just an incredible videographer, works for herself, has her own business, etcetera, does not have a kid, and
mm,
she has been able to work with some really large organizations, and she's
wow.
doing the stuff that I'm like, "These I wanted to do this."
Yeah,
And I see it like as like a pie where it's like limited pieces of a pie. And it's
yeah,
like, an organization like she posted something about working with an organization that like I've never reached out to. Like I have worked peripherally with people who are in that organization, but never like intentionally reached out to say, "Hey, I would love to work with you sometime." But I saw her do a post about it and I was like, "Wow, it's not fair." And then I'm like, "Wait, I didn't do anything to like even try to get on their radar." And then there's other times where I'm like, I feel so far behind because I have a kid, and so I just can't take advantage of as many opportunities. But then I'm like, I'm growing a human.
right.
And that's really hard
It
and
is
really,
hard.
really important. Like,
Mhm.
we need more kids in the world who have parents who are like
Yeah,
struggling and like having conversations about the news and who are like
yeah,
doing their best work. But even if it's not like the best, they're doing their best, but then also talking about their failures. Like, that's
right.
like, we just need more kids with parents like this.
Totally. Agreed, agreed, yeah. But I know I mean, I feel the same way. I mean, and journalism is so hard because you have all these other editors and all these other and I obviously was, like, just judgmental and defensive about the hard news versus the soft news. Like, I'm important too, So,
You are.
there's some jealousy there, like, "Damn," the protest happened and they were out there and where
Mm,
were we,
yeah.
There's always that FOMO in there too,
Mhm.
and it's taken me a while to, like, get to a place that, like, "No, it's okay."
Yeah,
Or I think, like, with news too, it's like, it's okay to, like,
yeah.
take a day off and log off. And I gotta, like, give credit to my good bosses for that
Mhm.
because they'll be like, you need to take a day off. You worked on Saturday."
Yeah,
But yeah, it's this thing in your mind where you're just like, "I have to be perfect.
yeah,
It's never good enough, and so
yeah.
I'm just gonna keep working, working, working." But I will say, I think that, like, it's easier because we're so judgmental and think we're right to then not perpetuate that. Like, I don't think I perpetuate that with my reporters at all,
Mhm. Yeah. I'm
I'm
very kind
right.
when I
I'm
hire
so
people.
kind to other people. I wish I would treat myself the way I treat other people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I have 3 rapid fire questions for you
Ooh,
for
okay,
the
let's do
end
it.
of this,
All right.
but before I get to those, is there anything else that you would like to say or talk about or plug? I think this will come out in, like, 2 weeks, so
Oh.
oh.
Well, so we're having a new series that's gonna launch next week. It's called Home is Where the Art
So cute.
is. So it's gonna drop next week, which if this comes out in 2 weeks, it'll be out by the
Mhm,
time this
mhm.
releases. I'm really proud of it. It's being produced by reporter Liz Mayong, who's just had this idea 2 years ago, and we're finally like really putting it it's all its glory. It has video, radio, print, digital, and it's just little profiles of
Mm.
people talking to us about the items in their home, the art in their homes that are special and make them feel at home. And yeah, I hope you guys will check it out.
Yes,
Yeah, that's my
I
plug.
love oh my gosh, I love being nosy about other people's stuff. So I'm very excited.
Yes.
Um, okay, rapid fire questions. What is something you had to recently unlearn?
What is something I had to recently unlearn? This is rapid fire? I thought you were gonna
Yeah.
say, what's your favorite color?
No, you have to answer it
Recently
you have to give me a
unlearned.
short answer.
A short answer?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's embarrassing. I don't know if I unlearned it,
Oh,
but I had to relearn it that
oh.
you really should be wearing sunblock every day. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that's really important
It
too.
really is important. Yeah.
What is your hottest take? And it can be silly or serious.
My hottest take? Oh my god, my hottest take. Mm.
I know you've got some.
Okay, my
Mm.
hottest take is some of the best prestige television right now is happening on the Real Housewives series.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, all of the things that you would want in a drama, in
Mhm.
Succession,
Mm.
you've got it in a Real Housewives series.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's my hot take.
Last question. What is something that made you really happy this past week?
I gotta go to my son,
Mm.
who is really, I mean, you've seen him. He's really in his adorable phase. Um, but he's gotten into this phase now that he can sort of like stitch full sentences together and like put on like adjectives and verbs and adverbs. And so
Mhm.
when I got home from work, he'll say, I missed you so much. And it just melts you. It's like, I wish I could, like, I guess I should record it and have it for times when he then tells me that he doesn't like
Mm.
me
As proof.
as proof that, but you missed me
Yeah.
today. Yeah.
No. Yeah. It's so sweet. It's so simple. And that's the good stuff.
That's the
I
good
have to
stuff.
keep reminding myself my Instagram, that's not where it's at. It's like
Yeah.
what's out here is that's
It's
the
true.
good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for this
Yeah.
great episode. I
Thanks for
think we're gonna
having
need a
me.
part two because we're both so
We got
busy and successful in our lives.
we gotta work through all our
Uh
Virgo trauma. I'll be here
yeah,
for you.
thanks. Thanks for listening and tune in. Tune in next time. I don't know. I need to talk with some news people about how to
How to, yeah. See you next time.
See you next time.
Yeah, just keep
We're
it
just
simple.
gonna fade out.